Chapter 6. A Reason to Fly. Midoriya woke up before his alarm the next morning. His dreams had been busy. Although he couldn't remember the details, he knew they had to be about his quirks somehow. He just couldn't stop thinking about it. All those years spent analyzing quirks and picking at their strengths and weaknesses, finally he had the chance to do that for his very own. Although, he still wasn't completely convinced he had a quirk at all. Perhaps it had just all been a weird dream. But then Midoriya saw his guitar, still balancing against the radiator by the front door, and he saw the black spots covering it in its entirety. Yeah, not a dream. That was when the idea hit him. Before hurrying out of his house to begin the new day, Midoriya raced back to his room, grabbed his portable speaker, and shoved it in the bottom of his rucksack. "Mom," Midoriya called out as he stood by the door, ready to leave. "Yes, Izuku?" she replied at a much lower volume, reappearing right next to him at such a speed that Midoriya briefly wondered if her quirk included teleportation. "Oh, um, I just wanted to say I might be later home than usual today," he warned her. "Are you going to that beach again?" she frowned. If that's okay," Midoriya stammered, gripping the straps of his rucksack nervously. "Well, honey, if you really think you have a quirk, then you need to be exploring it somewhere a little safer. Dagobah's fine, Mum, really, I'll be safe, I promise." "Yes, but other people might not be," she acknowledged, glancing at the burnt guitar. Uh, oh, Midoriya said, following her gaze. "I suppose not." "Why don't you ask UA?" she suggested hopefully. "They could help you register it." Yeah, I'll see if I can practice there then," he agreed. Inko teared up and threw herself into a hug. "I'm so proud of you, Izuku. You know that, right?" "Thanks, Mum. See you later." He pulled away after a moment and hurried out the door, leaving his mother staring after him, gripping the fret of his guitar fondly. "There he is!" Uraraka exclaimed as Midoriya ran up the hill towards them. Shinso wasn't too sure what he thought of Uraraka and Ida. The three of them had been waiting for Midoriya to arrive for the past 5 minutes, with Ida getting increasingly worried about being later than 10 minutes early to homeroom. Uraraka was definitely the one he preferred out of the two. She seemed light-hearted and kind, easy to befriend and easy to understand, but, just like Ida, she had it too easy. Neither of them had faced the troubles that Shinso had in terms of reaching out for their dreams. Then again, it was nothing compared to Midoriya. He tried to hide it, but it was clear to see. Midoriya would have loved to be a hero, but his lack of quirk held him back. Shinso couldn't help but wonder how different life would have been for Midoriya if he had been born with a power of his own. "Did you miss the train or something?" Shinso questioned, eyeing the pair of green headphones hanging around Midoriya's neck. No, he replied. He was getting more confident with his speaking. Shinso couldn't help but feel a little bubble of pride rising in his chest. I, I just got a little lost in thought." "What were you listening to?" Uraraka quizzed as Ida encouraged them to hurry up and head towards school. Here," he replied, before pulling off his headphones and handing them to Uraraka. She accepted them eagerly, standing close to Midoriya so their wire wouldn't pull them off. They walked in silence for a moment as Uraraka judged whatever she was listening to. "This is such a cute song!" she exclaimed rather loudly. "Oh, was I shouting?" she giggled, after taking them off and handing them back. "You should be cautious with the volume of your music," Ida instructed, chopping the air with his hands as he did so. "Too loud and you could damage your hearing." Sorry," Midoriya squeaked as he turned it off, leaving the headphones around his neck. "What was the song about?" Uraraka questioned. "Like, I think I'm okay with English, but song lyrics are just beyond my capabilities if they're not well known anyway." "Oh, it's called Wings," he answered. "Midoriya is fluent," Shinso told her after he neglected to do so. "Wait, in English?" Uraraka gasped. "I thought we were still talking about the song for a moment there, but seriously? Could you help me with my English homework? Present Mike is way more confident in our abilities than he should be." "As UA students, it's understandable that he thinks highly of our skills," Ida interjected. "Skills that don't exist," she laughed. The media had given up on standing on the school's doorsteps, so thankfully it wasn't as much of a struggle to get through the gates this time around. The two hero students waved goodbye to Shinso and Midoriya as they reached the door to Class 1C. Uraraka was still humming the tune to Midoriya's song as she skipped away. For Shinso, the rest of the morning went by like any ordinary day at UA. Midoriya, however, seemed distracted. He kept muttering to himself, nothing out loud, but the movements of his lips clearly indicated that his mind was transfixed on something. He kept scribbling things down in a notebook, periodically scrolling through his phone and occasionally putting on his headphones to listen to something for a while. However, it clearly wasn't for his enjoyment. The serious look on his face as he did this suggested otherwise. Shinzo decided not to pry. If Midoriya was willing to tell him, he would, given time. That was the thing with Midoriya. You had to be patient, wait your turn, and it would be worthwhile. Rush him into anything, and you would end up in a worse position than where you started. But Shinso would be lying if he said he didn't have his own distractions to consider. The sports festival. It was just around the corner. Only a few weeks, and his moment to shine would arrive, his chance to finally get out of general studies. He hadn't been there long, but he was already sick of seeing the hero students waltz to class, hero costumes in hand. His only regret that he wouldn't be able to bring Midoriya with him. However, as the day drew to a close, Shinso suddenly found himself with a reason to be happy to not be in Class 1A. When President Mike and a majority of UA's faculty members charged out of their lessons halfway through the day, leaving class presidents in charge without a hint as to what was going on, the collective student body began to panic. When they returned, Class 1C was told what had happened. The hero course was attacked during a rescue training exercise at a place called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, the USJ. They called themselves the League of Villains and were hell-bent on killing All Might. Not that Midoriya said a word, but it was clear to Shinso that he was beside himself with worry. Before the disruptive afternoon came to a close, the students of Class 1A returned to the main campus. Their arrival wasn't hard to miss, and Midoriya waited agitatedly by the entrance to Class 1C for them to walk by. "Hey, Midoriya!" Uraraka called out excitedly as she and Ida arrived alongside the rest of their colorfully clothed classmates. The expression on his face melted into visible relief as he saw how little cuts and bruises marred their faces. "Is everyone okay?" Shinso questioned, voicing what he knew Midoriya would have said if it weren't for all the other students milling around him, heading off to retrieve their things or to be checked out by Recovery Girl in the infirmary. "Thanks to the teachers," Uraraka answered, "and Ida. He was great. He managed to get out and ran all the way here to get help. Whilst everyone else stayed and fought, of course," he reminded her. "Hey, it could have gone a lot worse if it weren't for you," she snapped. "Don't beat yourself down about it." Shinso didn't miss Midoriya's nervous fidgeting as some of the soon-to-be heroes marched by. Another thing he acknowledged was the glare of an explosively dressed boy whose red eyes met Midoriya's green ones for a split second. Shinso wondered what the story behind that was, if there was one at all and the guy didn't just emit an aura of "touch me and I kill you." Both are equally likely to be true. "Nice hero costume," Shinso said, changing the subject. "Why, thank you," Ida replied, doing the chopping air thing again as he explained the various particularities and features. It reminds me of Ignium's costume," Midoriya stammered. "He's my elder brother," Ida announced proudly. Midoriya proceeded to gush over how cool he thought the hero was for the next 3 minutes. Shinso, meanwhile, was not as impressed. Typical. Ida had everything handed to him on a silver platter. He was born with the perfect quirk and the perfect opportunity to reach for the stars. Shinso had to work for it, but he would, harder than any other, and he would prove them wrong. "I should have been more specific with mine," Uraraka laughed feebly. "It's skin tight, and I would have preferred it to be a little looser, but I'm kind of getting used to it." They're both really good," replied Midoriya. "Hey, what are you two doing out there?" It was Ochi, who threw the door open dramatically. She blinked in surprise when she spotted the two hero students. "We were talking," Shinso replied coldly. "Well, President Mike should be back any minute, and he left me in charge," she snapped. "Can't you at least get in here and look like you've been doing some work?" "Ah, yes," Ida suddenly exclaimed. "We should probably return to our own class and check on what we should be doing next. Lead the way, class rep," Uraraka grinned. "See you guys soon." Midoriya waved weakly as Shinso dragged him back into the classroom as to not aggravate Ochi more than necessary. Like most of general studies, she wasn't fond of the Hero Corps students, and perhaps wasn't keen on the fact that they were conversing. Fortunately, President Mike returned only moments later and began to explain that school would be ending a little early whilst the matter surrounding the USJ attack was dealt with. "You're welcome to hang around if your train doesn't leave the station until the day's officially up, but other than that, you're officially dismissed," he announced overdramatically. Nearly all of the class got up immediately, chattering amongst themselves in already tight-knit friendship groups as they left the room behind President Mike. The only one who didn't, in fact, was Midoriya. "Can't you get an earlier train?" Shinso questioned curiously as he noticed Midoriya made no effort to pack away his various things. He shrugged and then signed. "I've still got some work to finish, and I'll concentrate better here than home. I think I'll wait until the day's officially up." "I can wait with you if you want some company," Shinso offered. Midoriya shook his head frantically. "It's really fine. I'll only be riding anyway, so see you tomorrow?" He seemed rather dismissive, but again, if Midoriya didn't want Shinso to know something, then Shinso would give it time, and leave him to it, hoping that one day he'd trust him enough to explain. "Sure, see you tomorrow." After all, Shinso didn't really want to stick around and deal with the press mobbing the school again after news of the USJ attack got out. Midoriya felt awful about lying to Shinso, but he just wasn't ready to tell him about his quirk. Not until he was sure what it actually was. Moreover, if he did tell him, he would have to show his quirk to him, and that would require singing. He'd just barely gotten used to talking. Singing would take a little more time to get used to. With all the chaos surrounding the USJ attack, most students headed home as quickly as they could. A few noticed Midoriya lagging behind. He knew he told Mom that he would ask for permission to practice his quirk at school so it could be registered, but if he couldn't even muster the courage to tell Shinso, how could he possibly tell a teacher? That was why, only once he was sure everyone who knew him had gone, Midoriya mustered the courage to pack up his things and hurry out of Class 1C. From the tour at the beginning of term, Midoriya knew vaguely where the different gyms and halls were situated around UA. Eventually, he found himself at the door to the spacious hall where they had played dodgeball against Class 1D only a few days prior. In the panic of leaving school early, someone had forgotten to lock the doors, and Midoriya let out a thankful sigh of relief as it swung open for him. Once inside, he shut the door behind him and flicked on the light switch, revealing a massive, empty space for him to work with. He took off his blazer and tie, leaving them in a pile by his rucksack. Then, after delving for some time, he managed to locate his little speaker and plugged it into his phone. After it was set up, Midoriya finally pulled out a pen in his new notebook, which he had titled Quirk Analysis. It was a title that was inconspicuous enough to be ignored by anyone who picked it up, thinking it was another one of his hero analysis notebooks. But different enough for Midoriya to distinguish. It wasn't just any quirk analysis notebook. It was an analysis on his quirk. Okay, Midoriya mumbled, letting his thoughts tumble out into reality without fearing anyone could hear them. He picked up his notebook and began pacing around the hall, reading his notes so they were fresh in his mind. So, my quirk activates whenever I sing a song, and it seems to give me a power whilst I'm singing that correlates with the meaning behind the song in question. And then I can't use that power again for a limited amount of time, probably. That would explain why singing Set Fire to the Rain didn't work twice in a row. The power also seems to get stronger the longer I sing the song. For example, for my first song, at the beginning, the rain only grew hot, but then it set alight when the music swelled for the second chorus, so strength of the power depends on how far through the song I am. He paused, tapping his pen on his lip thoughtfully. After a moment, he flipped through the notebook a little further, past the blank pages he'd left for further analysis, and reached his pages on possible songs and what abilities they could grant him. Sure, he was getting a little ahead of himself. There was still a looming possibility that all this was just a freak accident, and that he had no quirk at all, but, for the first time in a while, Midoriya had allowed himself to be optimistic. With all these detrimental thoughts of it all being a big misunderstanding, Midoriya realized there was only one way to prove to himself that he really had a quirk. Sing a song that would grant him a power that would very clearly not be a fluke. The song carried on. It was familiar to Midoriya. He had heard it many times, over and over again. The sound of the drums seemed to find a rhythm with every other beat of his heart. It was so easy to sink into the music, to drift away from thoughts of villain attacks and anxiety. When he was alone with his music, everything was okay. I was lightning before the thunder. A smile broke across his face, his feet moving in time to the rhythm. He twisted and he turned, not caring about how messy and unchoreographed his dancing would have looked. He was enjoying himself. That was all that really mattered. Thunder, feel the thunder. He could have sworn the whole building shook as he slammed his feet on the ground. The sound of thunder echoed around him, and then the chorus ended. Lightning, then the thunder. With a crash and a flash of light, Midoriya screamed. The lights flickered, swaying above them. When they returned to normality, panting, Midoriya gazed down at his feet. Right there, next to him, was a scorch mark far greater than those left peppered across his guitar, the mark left behind by a lightning bolt. Midoriya stood there for a moment in shock, staring at the blackened floor. Then he laughed, running back over to his phone and switching off the music. Oh yeah, he most definitely had a quirk. Jotting down the results of his first test in his notebook, Midoriya sat by his bag, unable to stifle the massive grin splitting across his face. But what now? He picked up his phone and scrolled down through what he most recently played when he stumbled across the song Uraraka had been listening to earlier that day. Unlike the other songs he had thought of testing, Midoriya wasn't too sure what this could bring. But how could he ever know for sure until he tried it out for himself? There was something about this song, a certain understanding and belonging. It was like he could relate to it more than it most likely intended. It was likely about love, about two people finding safety and serenity in each other's company. But Midoriya didn't quite see it like that. He felt like it was about a guardian angel, someone who could lift you up from your darkest moments in life. That someone could be anyone, surely, his mother, his friends, even himself. A part of himself with the confidence to soar above the negativity in others and reach for the stars. Say you'll catch me when I fall. He almost forgot about his quirk in that moment, deep in thought about the meaning behind the music. So, with a sense of surprise, which was becoming routine alongside his new powers at this point, the chorus arrived. Wrap your wings around my body. Midoriya wasn't dancing this time, just singing to the empty hall. Perhaps it was because he wasn't moving that he was able to maintain his composure and keep singing when the power activated, and a pair of massive green wings wrapped themselves around him. Struggling to keep in tune, Midoriya spun around on the spot, trying to figure out where the mass of feathers had come from. It was only when he managed to reach the small of his back with his fingertips that he realized the wings were his, protruding from beneath his shoulder blades. He tried not to laugh with a mixture of shock and gleefulness as it dawned on him that yes, he had just grown wings. We stood on the skyline, there was no turning back, and you said not to stare at the ground. He slowly let the wings unravel and droop behind him like a cape of feathers. He was still singing when he tested his new limbs, moving them about unsuredly in a similar manner to how a newborn foal would wobble on its legs, still grinning like a fool. When he realized the next chorus was about to begin, he hurried back to his bag and spread his wings to their fullest extent, crouching like he was at the start of a 100-meter dash. When I'm lost in the storm and I'm calling. When the familiar chorus began, he pushed himself forward, picking up as much speed as he could before flapping his great wingspan, and it wasn't long before his feet were no longer touching the ground. Wrap your wings, wrap your wings, wrap your wings around my body. When he almost hit the wall on the opposite side of the hall, he turned clumsily in the air. Managing not to yell in fright, he somehow changed direction. Whilst being thankful for the hall's ridiculously high ceiling, Midoriya whooped in joy when the song allowed him to do so. Before long he was somersaulting, twisting and turning with ease. After his initial struggle, flying came so effortlessly to him. It was instinct, as natural as it would be for a fledgling bird, given time. Midoriya didn't know if it was his own body or if it was part of his quirk that allowed this to be true, but he didn't really care at this point. In his euphoria, with the wind blowing in his hair and through his feathers, he felt lost to the world. For here, alone in the hall at UA, Midoriya finally had a reason to fly. However, he wasn't quite as alone as he thought he was.